everybody for being here. I'm Michael Munson. I am really happy to spend some time with you tonight, and we're going to talk about emotions. So just a quick hi, who are you? So you know who's being in the space with you tonight. I'm Michael Munson. I'm Forge's executive director. I've been doing training and advocacy for over 35 years in some variety, trans work for the last 30 plus years. A little bit about Forge. We are a 30-year-old trans anti-violence organization. We do national-based work, predominantly with victim service providers and other allied professionals that help survivors of multiple different kinds of abuse who are trans and non-binary. So that's kind of a thumbnail of our work for those that are not familiar. We try to make sure that we live by and work and have it be a through line to have our guiding principles, shine through. And those guiding principles are about being trauma informed. Again, that's when we work with providers and when we work with community members, as well as empowerment based. We definitely want people to feel empowered and inspired and feel good and feel that they're learning something and getting something of value. We also know that to be trauma-informed and empowerment-based, we need to be culturally responsive. And that is something that I think we are working on continually to make sure that we are up to speed and informed and tapped in. So those are a couple of our guiding principles just to let you know of kind of what the framework is that we have going into this space. I want to remind folks, please, to take care of yourself, and that can look really different for different people. So whatever it is that you need to do for yourself, I encourage you to do so. We're going to be recording tonight so that if you want to step out for a few minutes or for the rest of the session, you'll be able to come back and watch it later if you would like to. I'm going to have several points tonight where I'll ask for your participation. You can choose to join in that, those kind of chat-based, poll-based things or not. All of it is good. So whatever you need to do, again, is good for you. It's good for all of us. You'll get a little bit of a resource handout, not much from tonight's session, but definitely more for sessions 2 and 3 the next couple of weeks, so that you'll have some printable resources and links to some of the stuff that we talked about. So I want to make sure that I overtly say that we really welcome all of you in this space. We welcome your experience, your knowledge, your curiosity, your playfulness, all of the things that you bring into this space. We really welcome them to be here with us today. We also welcome your questions, however that may present itself tonight or after we're done with tonight's session. And we welcome your body and your mind and your spirit and all that you want to bring into this space and all that you don't want to leave into the space, bring into the space, you can leave behind, but we welcome all of you to be here. Before I go over the agenda, I forgot to mention that Caleb and Emil are both here from Forge's staff. And if you have any technical issues or any challenges, feel free to ping one of them. Caleb is our point person for the night. So if you have any questions that are technical in nature, please feel free to bounce them off of Caleb. So our agenda for tonight is a really simple one. We're going to be talking about emotions. So what are emotions? And hopefully it will be engaging. Sometimes when we talk about things that are like, what are emotions? It's going to sound silly to say it, but hopefully we'll have some good interaction around some of the nuances. Talk a little bit about stimulus and response cycles, just to help kind of frame why and where and how some emotions play out the way they do. We'll talk about some common categories of emotions, and we'll look at some things like emotions and sensations and how things are tied together between our brain and our emotions and our body. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's going to happen the next 2 weeks. All right. So today we're going to use a couple of features. One of them is going to be the chat, and the other one is going to be poll everywhere. So this is one of those places that's like, if you feel like using your phone and grabbing the QR code, great. You can also engage with the content when we get there, and Caleb will put things into the chat like he just did right now. So you can be prepared and, again, participate if you'd like to or not. All right. So we're going to talk about emotions and like the fact that we all have them. So when we think about emotions, let's think a little bit about what we do and what we don't have. So as we start and kind of frame tonight, I really want to emphasize just some really basic core things that like emotions are really complex. They're usually not simple. They're usually complicated. We don't have to make them complicated, but they usually are kind of complex. Emotions are subjective. So one person might feel a certain way about something, and another person might feel a different way. And again, there's kind of no good or bad to that. It's just we have subjective experiences and subjective emotions. Emotions tend to be full-bodied. Whether we're aware of our full body or not, emotions can affect any part of our physical being as well as our mind and what's in our head. Emotions are almost always connected to thoughts. Again, we might not be conscious of what those connections are between our emotion and our thought, but 99% of the time there is a connection there. If we want to pay attention to it or if we need to pay attention to it. And emotions stimulate urges or behaviors or actions. So a lot of times we don't act on some of the things that we have an emotion, we have a thought, and we might want to act on something. Sometimes we act on them, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we want to control if we act on something or not. I think a lot of us can think about like if we're feeling a little hot or a little bit angry at something. Sometimes we feel the urge to act out some of those emotions. Or if we feel sad, we might feel like crying. So sometimes it encourages us, and we want to behave in a certain way as well as feel those feelings. Sometimes our emotions are really, really, really big. So sometimes we have big feels, and sometimes we have really small feels. Sometimes we don't even notice what we're feeling because they're so small. Sometimes our emotions are really, really loud, and that can be loud about anything. It can be loud, angry, loud, happy, loud, any kind of emotion. And sometimes our emotions are really soft. So big and small, loud and soft, all of those things, lots of different range for the emotions that we might be feeling. And again, no good emotions, no bad emotions, they just are. Emotions just are. I think it's important to note that things can change over time. And I've been really aware of this lately for a couple of reasons, but emotions can change over time. How we process our emotions can change over time. One of the things that can change is that we age. We get literally older. We have more experiences. We might have new skills. Hopefully, we're always learning new skills about how we are and who we are and how to work with our emotions and be better in the world and better with ourselves. And I don't mean better in a good, bad way, but just more able to feel our feels and do so in a way that doesn't feel uncomfortable or bad to us. Things can change over time too because the world happens. Things in the world might affect how we do feel our emotions or how we respond to our emotions when we feel them. And again, some of those things we can't really control. They're outside of us. So things change over time. We might have different life experiences or life events that may change what we feel or how we can process what we feel. So again, this is just kind of like these overarching things about emotions without really kind of going into, well, what are emotions? What are we doing here? So I would love to hear from you all in the chat. And I know just about everybody these days knows how to find the chat. So if you can find the chat, I'd love to hear your comments about where did you learn about emotions when you were a kid? Um, Maybe nobody talked to you about emotions and what emotions are, but they might have shown you what emotions are. Where did you learn about emotions when you were a kid? Watching my parents, yeah. To keep things calm is what somebody learned, yeah. What else did people learn from anybody when they were a kid? Okay, that boys don't show emotions. Emotions should be quiet and internal, not to share them. Yeah. That emotions have consequences. Yeah. Um, so some people learn that what you feel is never wrong, which is really validating, but also lacks some nuance. Yep. And another parent taught that person you don't need to share all of them. Um, Other people are saying that emotions can lead to bad results or emotions are unsafe. That brown bodies are only allowed to express certain kinds of emotions. Yeah, yeah. Emotions can lead to violence. Yeah, those are some of the messages that we hear, right? And depending on who we are and what our experiences are, we're going to hear different messages that come through. I'm seeing that anger isn't an emotion is one of the messages people have heard. Yeah. Emotions are scary and explosive. Yeah. Emotions aren't valid. Wow. Yeah. Those are fantastic. I encourage you, if you want to keep them rolling, please keep them rolling. I'm going to keep us moving, but there's a lot of stuff there that really points out what our childhood, what our early life is, that can really influence how we function as adults, how we think about emotions as adults, how we might express or not express our emotions as adults. Because what you all shared are really common themes, and some of them are really potent. And some of them can be really hard. So thank you for sharing. So when we think about emotions, our connection to emotions might be different. Well, they are different for everybody. For some people, it's really easy to get tapped into their emotions. They oftentimes know what they're feeling, can express what they're feeling. And it's a really simple thing for some people. And for other people, it's a really, really hard thing, not knowing what is being felt or how to share it with anybody or how to calm it or increase it or decrease it or do anything with it. Sometimes it's really, really, really hard. And I just want to make sure that we have space tonight and we have space in our brains, my brain, hopefully in your brain as well, to recognize that we have different people that have different levels of connections to their emotions, to their bodies, to their brains, to their sensations. And why I really want to mention this is that we interact in the world with other people. Even if we don't want to interact with a lot of people, we have interactions with other people. And when people don't kind of operate the same way that we do, sometimes it's really difficult when we have feelings and we kind of expect other people to respond and be the same way, and they're not. So I mean, all of us know this, right? But it's sometimes it's hard to remember that we process emotions differently. We can access emotions differently or not access them. And however you are, however I am, it is 100% good. It's all good. It's just who we are and how we inhabit our bodies and minds. We might need to look at some different strategies when we're looking at trying to ramp up or slow down our emotions or how to communicate emotions to other people. But all of the ways that we are with our emotions and our bodies are totally fine the way they are. So let's look at what emotions are. So now's the time for your phone or your web browser to kind of add into a thing that we're all going to be able to see on the screen about what our emotions are. Hard to define sometimes, but like, how would you define what emotions are? It might take just a moment for things to start to populate when people start adding, but what are emotions? And it's not a trick question. Feelings of moods, yeah. Energy, yeah. Combination of memories, physical sensations, and the thoughts we attach to them. Yeah. Internal sensations that we express that express our reality. Chemical reactions, signals and messages, indicators. Yeah. Responses to stimuli and experiences. Feelings that move through us. They don't define us, but they can physically, mentally, and spiritually feel them. Yeah. Emotions are responses from stimuli, outside or inside, that change the way we process and use information. Yeah. Shifting tides within us, mental and physical responses. Mhm. A combination of heart and soul and body. Yeah. Internal responses to external stimuli, triggers reactions to both internal and external experiences. You all are so smart. Yes. All the answers are great, really, really cool. And you've tapped into some of the stuff that we're going to just very briefly talk about tonight. But all of what you've put in there are things that we could talk for hours and hours and hours about, and it would be really fun if we did that. Thank you for adding your thoughts about what emotions are. So I'm going to give you like kind of a what I or some other folks think emotions are. And again, this is one version of what emotions are. All of what you just shared are what emotions are as well. Um, but when I think about emotions, I think about how emotions are really complex. We kind of, I mentioned that a little bit before. They're complex, they're full-bodied, they're full system experiences. And emotions are always prompted by something. So we usually feel something in response to things that happen out in the world or in our bodies. I mean, that's a really simple way of putting it, but we're responding to something. And usually it's one of the five senses that brings that information into us that we then are responding to. And so when our bodies, when we have those emotions that are prompted, they usually come along with things that are in our head, our thoughts, interpretation. So how do we make sense of what we're feeling, what's coming into us? We generally have some beliefs about what happened or beliefs about those emotions. So we're assigning meaning, we're adding thoughts, and usually they come with a physical sensation. We might not be aware of what those physical sensations are, but almost all emotions make us feel a specific way physically. We can think about things like anxiety that might make us feel physically sweaty on the palms or kind of agitated or fidgety. There's a lot of emotions that have really kind of a predictable pattern for some of us about what kind of a physical response there's going to be to an emotion. Sometimes our physical responses are very different from time to time to time, and emotions are so nuanced that we might have a zillion different kinds of physical responses to very similar emotional experiences. Like we've kind of mentioned before, and like some of you mentioned in the feedback already, is that oftentimes emotions have an urge to act. They make us want to do something. They may want to make us want to translate our feelings into a behavior. So we may want to act in a certain way. I'm trying to think of something other than being angry. Like, if somebody cuts you off on the freeway, you may want to yell at the person out your window or whatever it is, because that emotion creates and evokes a response of wanting to do something about it. So that's kind of a frame of like what emotions are. Again, really basic stuff that we're talking about, but sometimes we don't put it into words. So many of you clearly are really informed about stimulus response cycles. I'm going to go really quickly through this, and because many of you already know what the deal is, and I don't want to be too nerdy about folks about the subject when folks already know what things are. The really simple thing is that there's a stimulus, something that happens, and we have a response to it. So we have thousands and thousands and thousands of things every day that are stimuli. They're things that come in through any one of our senses. If you have five senses, not everybody has all five senses, but whatever senses you have, you're going to be getting input in pretty constantly throughout the day. So that's a lot of input to have happening, and a lot of emotions that can happen with it. And then those emotions are connected to thoughts, connections to sensations, connected to possible urges to act. So there's a lot of stuff that can happen when we have every stimulus. Most of the time, most people are not, all agitated about what's happening as they receive those stimuli. It's just a normal part of their day. They're used to that level of stimulation. Sometimes things don't go as smoothly, or they don't go as we expect or predict or have in our pattern. And that's where things can start to change and get a little bit more interesting or a little bit more spicy. So the biggest part that I want to just kind of bring forward in the stimulus response cycle is really stuff that happens to do with trauma, things that happen to do with memories that are stored that may have a lot of emotional charge to them. Things can get more complicated too when we feel threatened or scared or in danger or have other similar really strong emotions. When those kinds of things happen, when we get memories tapped or when we feel threatened or scared in the moment, our bodies respond really differently and different parts of our brain kick in. Again, many of you already know that, but let's do a little quick 101 review of what happens in our brains. So some people like to call this the triune brain, because we're going to talk about three parts of our brain and how they respond differently. So most of the time in our everyday waking life, we operate mostly out of our frontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain. And that's kind of what runs the show. much of the time. And that part of our brain is pretty rational and calm and can make decisions about the input that we're getting in and respond in a way that we want to respond in the world. There's an emotional part of our brain. So it's kind of the middle part of our brain. And that's part of where the processing of memories and emotions happen. And that's going to be connected in all of these kinds of things, as well as to the survival brain, which is the third part of the brain. And that survival part of the brain, it really kind of shuts down the thinking part of the brain, and it does exactly what I've just named it, which is the survival brain, right? It tries to keep you alive. It tries to make sure that all of the blood in your body goes to your heart and your muscles so that if you are being physically threatened, you can run if that's a possibility for you. You can take physical action. So it's a very primitive part of our brain, but a really essential part of it. And it's very self-protective. So those are the three parts of the brain. Like I was saying, the survival brain is something that's really reactive. It doesn't take time to ponder the options or think like, oh, what would a good choice be here? It says, oh my God, I am scared. I am going to act right now. And the response time is someplace around 1/12 of a second between when a stimulus happens and when the neurotransmitters flood our brain and when we start to have that response to something. So our survival brain is really quick, doesn't think through a lot of options, can't think through a lot of options, and it gets activated when we feel scared or threatened or afraid. That part of our brain is really different than the thinking part of our brain. So the front part of our brain, the part of our brain that we spend probably the majority of our time in. And that part of our brain is a lot slower than the survival brain, a lot slower. And that's a really good thing in many ways because it allows us to think about what kinds of choices we want to make, how we want to act. Do we like how we're feeling right now, or would we like it to change? Would we like more of it, less of it? It allows us to make really informed choices about our feelings, our actions, our thoughts. So I'm just going to focus on those two parts, the survival brain and the thinking brain, because this is an overview and we're not talking about science tonight. I also wanted to kind of frame things a little bit by sharing just what dialectical behavioral therapy is, because I'm going to reference two things as part of their four kind of quadrant of components in the DBT program. So dialectical behavioral therapy is really a type of evidence-based therapy that focuses on helping folks manage really intense emotions, improve relationships with themselves, with other people, and to reduce self-harming behaviors. There are lots of really fantastic memory cues and skills that come out of DBT. So I'm not pushing DBT as like this is a really great thing, but there are some really, really great tools. And in session 2 and session 3, we're going to bring a couple of them forward because I think they're really useful for a lot of us to have in our toolbox. So I wanted to mention two of the four things. The first one is distress tolerance. So distress tolerance is really kind of going to tap into when our survival brain is in full gear. It's when we're feeling really a lot of emotions, a lot of really strong emotions. We might not be able to do anything about what we're feeling. We might not be able to do something about the situation that we're in. So distress tolerance is literally about like, how do I ratchet down the distress that I'm feeling, the upset that I'm feeling. And that's really different than emotional regulation, which is about, okay, I'm really upset. I'm feeling really a strong positive emotion. I'm feeling some kind of emotion, and I would like to feel differently. And my thinking brain is on board. So let me figure out how I can feel differently or act differently. So one is going to, again, that kind of more primal, more primitive, more, I just need to do what I can to feel less distressed. And then emotional regulation is let's kind of problem solve. Let's figure out a way that we can be in the world, be in our bodies, be in our brains a little bit more comfortably and functionally. So this is kind of a dorky image on the screen, but it's what I could find, and it shows this higher cortex, the thinking brain, the middle brain, the amygdala, and then the brainstem, so the survival part of the brain. One of the things that my partner and I used to talk about all the time was when that survival brain, when that really primitive part kicks in, if one of us is upset or really struggling with something, we're in the basement. So the basement literally is kind of the bottom of those three parts of the brain. So if somebody's in the basement, which was a fun phrase that we used to use, it's like, okay, we're not going to try to problem solve right now. We're not going to try to have a kind of a normal interactive conversation. That part of our brain is turned off. So, okay, we're in the basement. When people are done being in the basement and are in a better space or are on the first floor, we can have problem solving conversations. We can have connection. We can have some choice based interactions or self soothing. So it's just another one of those cues of like, I think it's kind of fun sometimes to have phrases or things with the people that are in our life who are in our world so that we can easily identify something and help them figure out kind of how to respond in those moments. So I was running across some photos as I was trying to figure out what to include in tonight's thing, and I took this picture. It's my arm after I had blood drawn, and the only band-aid that they had was this Tasmanian devil. And it really made me think about the fact that like distress tolerance in my head is kind of like putting a band-aid on things. It's like, okay, I'm gonna be a little bit graphic with blood. So like, hey, bleeding out right now, don't know how to make the bleeding stop, but you know what? I can put a band-aid on it. I don't know what's wrong, but I'm gonna put a band-aid on it. I'm gonna try to stop the bleeding and just see if that will allow it to chill out. Um, and it's fun because it was Tasmanian devil thing. So it's again, like we can use language like in the basement, which is a cue. It's a cue to yourself. It's a cue to somebody else that you care about or that you're with. And the band-aid thing is another kind of, can we make fun in ways when we are really distressed? Can we have a moment of levity? Sometimes we can't, and that's okay. But sometimes we could say, oh, yeah, I'm going to go get that Tasmanian devil band-aid and put it on my arm. Maybe you're not even bleeding, but like, is there something that might help you feel more calm, more okay in the moment when you're feeling really distressed? So people that are really familiar with DBT may want to fire me because I know that I am not a therapist. I am not a DBT expert, but this is my take that I'm sharing with you to grab it or don't grab it. Lean into learning about what distress tolerance is more than what I've shared with you, and go with it. All right, so that was a really, really quick overview. We didn't talk too much about neurology or brain chemistry. That's really fun. Not going to do it tonight. All right, let's talk about some categories of emotions. So I would love folks to grab whatever device you're using to do poll everywhere. And if I ask you to think about like what are some overarching categories of emotions, what would they be? How would you clump them together? If you had to like create like an outline, what is the first level of the outline that other emotions might go under? So let's take a moment and if you want to type in, that would be great. Oh my gosh, you guys are fast. All right, so wanting, positive, seen. Oh my God, there's a whole bunch of things that are in there. Yeah, great. I'm just going to wait for a second while this populates. So hurt, negative, painful, mm, heavy. Mm. So euphoria, reactions, affirmation, passive, celebratory, tired, mm, content, impulsive, active, seen, intense, grief, yeah, wanting. Mhm. I may have missed some of them that came in, but those are a wide variety of different ways of kind of categorizing or clumping emotions. So hopefully, as we move along, we can kind of see like what some of the things are that might be under some of those headers. I wanted to offer a couple of suggestions of what some folks think are some common categories of emotions. I mean, these are really different than what you all shared, and I love what you shared because I think it's really cool that we have lots of different ways that we can categorize or try to be able to put words to the things that we're feeling. So 6 commonly identified categories. that people sometimes talk about are things like fear and anger, disgust, sadness, happiness, and surprise. Lots and lots and lots of emotions go underneath those things. And those are not always the best categories to clump things under. So sometimes people have a category that might be like about envy or jealousy, or about love, or about shame, or about guilt, or about any of the things that you all just put in to that brainstorm. So there's a lot of ways that we can think about categorizing and thinking about our emotions. And sometimes in order to be able to name our emotions, sometimes it's good to kind of think, oh, like what kind of genre is this? What kind of, what kind of area are my emotions in? And sometimes that's helpful to then get a little bit more specific about our actual state right at the moment. Okay. So we've talked a couple of times about how emotions are linked with sensations. So this could be something a little bit fun, and maybe something a little bit unexpected, which is even more fun. So on the slide right now is a part of a wheel, an emotions wheel, and the word SWAT is up in the corner, and the three words that are on the little arc are sulk, SWAT, and hiss. So if folks want to put in the chat, those are the kind of the sensations. What would the emotions go with those if we pick the sensation of SWAT? So SWAT is almost an action behavior, but it's a sensation behavior. What kind of emotions would go with SWAT? Anger. What else? Overstimulated. Dismissive. Yeah. Annoyed, surprised. Yeah. We think about swatting. We think about being annoyed, being dismissive, being impatient, being avoidant. Mhm. Are there other things that come to mind when you think of that word? Defensive, fear. Yeah, those are great. Thank you. I'm going to reveal the next kind of layer of the circle. So like we've got the kind of the sensation behavior on the outside, and then we're going to go to the emotion on the inside. So this is not what any of you said, which is really cool. And it's not what you said because we're talking about a cat right now. So if a cat is feeling swatty and wants to swat things, they might be feeling grumpy. So that's really, really, really different than if a person is feeling like they want to swat something or that sensation. So I just wanted us to play a little bit with the fact that like if we use our cats as an example of like what is their behavior, what is their sensation, and what are they feeling? Cats feel a lot of things. How do they play that out? Let's do another one. Again, another cat thing. So not a human thing. So here are three words that are flap, big sigh, or stretch. All of those three things sound really good to me right now. Let's take flap. So if you think about flap, what kind of emotions go with the word flap? I'm seeing tired, sleepy, relaxed. Yeah. What else goes with flap? Again, you can think about the cat, flap. Wanting to connect. Oh, yeah, wanting to connect. Oh, yes. Content, lethargic. Yeah. Yep, decompress, which is really cool because like there's a range of things right in here of like feeling relaxed or wanting to connect or leaning in or feeling lethargic. Lots of different emotions that could go with flap. You see calm and tired, all of that stuff. Great. So in this particular wheel, um, they assigned the cat who wants to flop or big sigh or stretch as being dramatic. So like, oh my God, I'm gonna flop down as being dramatic. Now you all have come up with some other ideas which are just as right as what's on this wheel. But again, it's kind of like, how do we interpret what our sensations or kind of behaviors are, and how do they translate or align with what our emotions are? So those are cats. This is a wheel that is from Lindsay Brayman. I don't know if that is how she says her name, but it's a fun, playful one of a cat, wheel for a cat. She's got a wheel for a dog, and then she has a people wheel. And we're going to talk about the people wheel next, but I know it's really hard to see, but I'll make sure that you all get a copy of this to look at more closely. But these are all cat behaviors or sensations on the outside. And then grumpy or dramatic or bored or having the zoomies or being sleepy or feeling lovey is the emotional state on the inside. Thank you for playing with me. All right, so let's talk about humans. Let's think about humans. this is going to be way too small for any of us to read. I just wanted to give you kind of a visual of an emotion wheel. There are lots and lots of emotion wheels that you can find online. Different ones present things differently. You could probably line up 50 different wheels and have 50 different ways of how people classify or talk about or connect different things on those wheels. This wheel is kind of looking at those 6 kind of core categories of emotion that I mentioned in the beginning. So like anger and fear and distrust or disgust and sadness and happy and surprise, I think is the last one. So I wanted to take a couple of examples here for us to kind of play with it again. And whatever we say, they're not going to be right or wrong answers. They're just ways that we are looking at a sensation and an emotion and how we think that they connect. So I'm just grabbing a part of the wheel right now. And you can see there's a couple of words here. So these are kind of, words that may belong in the same category for some people. So words like steady and relaxed, still, sensitive, warm, light, buzzing. So those are kind of some of the sensations that somebody might be feeling in this category. Let's take the sensation of buzzing. So when you hear the word buzzing, or when you think, if you kind of think about your own body, and when you think of your body in a state that's buzzing, what kind of an emotion goes with that state? Again, if you want to use the chat, that's a great place for us to connect. All right, so I'm seeing excitement or anxious, anxiety, hunger. Like, yeah, hunger, turn on. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Pain or overstimulation, activated. Right. What else do people think? That kind of a buzzing sensation. Passionate. Yeah. What's really interesting here is that some people that are saying anxious, that's really different than being turned on. Maybe it's not different. Maybe it's all the same. But to me, they seem like those things might be really, really different for the same person. That somebody who feels anxious, that might feel different for them than feeling turned on. But people are saying both of those things might be true, truly associated with that buzzing. I'm also seeing some additional things about passionate, energized, excited, anticipation, and love. Yeah. How you're responding now could also be about how you're feeling now or what the last time was that you felt that buzzing sensation. Let me share with you what's on this particular wheel and what this wheel connects to different emotions. So this is kind of the second layer of emotions, then we're going to go down to the core layer. So you can see what they have here is that buzzing and light, this wheel puts with optimistic. So none of you mentioned optimistic, which is kind of cool, right? That you all were going into some other places. This wheel says optimistic. And then when they look at the very, very core one, they say it's about happiness. So again, very different than what we all just created here of like, hey, there's a sensation, here's an emotion, here's a core emotion. Again, this is one wheel. We could look at a lot of different wheels, but it might give you some ideas if you look at those wheels, right? Of thinking, well, what am I feeling? I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't have the words to name what I'm feeling, but I have this sensation, and maybe I can figure out what I'm feeling if I kind of trace it in, or if I look at one of these wheels, or if I talk to somebody else and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling, this is what a sensation is. Can we talk about it, or can we talk about what I might be feeling? Let's do another example of this because it's fun. I think it's fun. Hopefully it's fun for you all. So this is kind of another section of that wheel. And some of the words that are in this section are ready, cold, tense, frozen, quiet, heart racing or racing heart, foot tapping, or fidgety. So let's take the word fidgety and what does that translate to for folks? So if you're feeling fidgety in your body, what emotion might that go with? There's a cat in the chat. Love the cat in the chat. Thank you for the cats showing up. Okay, so fidgety might turn out to an emotion of being stressed out, being anxious, being poised to react quickly, being overstimulated or overwhelmed. It could be about being nervous if you're fidgety. It could be about being afraid, dissociative or uncomfortable. Yeah. Being scared, being unsafe. Yeah. What else does fidgety mean? Being bored. Yeah. So again, we've got, I don't want to polarize emotions, but like being anxious, feels quite a bit different than being bored. Again, they could coexist, but a lot of times people don't think of those two things as close to each other. Some people might say it's being focused. Yeah, because sometimes when people fidget, that feels really focusing. Yeah. Those are a lot of different kinds of answers to that one word of fidgeting. Let's see what this wheel says. So this wheel says anxious. So many of you made a comment about being anxious or nervous or some of those related words to that some people relate to being anxious. So the foot tapping and the fidgeting in this wheel relate to anxious emotions in this wheel. And in this wheel, it then gets to the core emotion of fear. So many of you certainly expressed things that were not likely back to the fear state that this chart does. And many of you kind of hinted at some other things. We didn't, we were talking about like what feeling is it rather than kind of what is the experience of that person. But people might fidget because they have ADHD. They might fidget because like they're focusing, like somebody did say. They might fidget because they're physically uncomfortable and they're trying to just find a way to be comfortable in their body and they're just moving a lot to get into a physically comfortable space. They might be fidgeting, or at least what looks like fidgeting to an outsider, but they might not be fidgeting. Maybe they have a movement condition where they have a tremor, and to other people it looks like they're nervous or that they're fidgeting or they're uncomfortable, but it's just their body doing their tremor thing, and it's just a normal thing for them, and they don't have any hugely tied emotions to those things. So these are just a couple of examples of where we could look at a sensation and see what emotion might be tied to it, and then see kind of what kind of core emotion might be tied to it. And we could go the other way around too. We could have started with, if you feel anxious, what kind of sensations would you feel? Actually, why don't we do that? Let's do that for fun. So if I said, what does sensations feel like in your body when you feel anxious? What kinds of things would you say? Nauseous, yeah. Tight, sweaty, tense, yeah. Heart pounding. Yeah, so feeling anxious would be sweaty, tight, heart pounding, unsteady, snappy. Yep, yep. Pain. Right. Exactly. Distracted. Tightness. Yeah. These are excellent, and I think sometimes the more familiar an emotion is, more familiar at least the language is, like anxious. A lot of us kind of have in our heads what it's like to feel anxious, and we can pretty easily tap into what does our body feel like when we think about what does anxious feel like you all have just done. Um, and I'm guessing that many of you might have different sensations with different kinds of anxiety, because being anxious is not a one-dimensional emotion, which is the fantastic things about emotions is that there are lots of different ways that we might experience or feel or be with those emotions. Let's take a moment and think about what some of the actions might be that we may want to take. So our sensations are fidgety, our emotions are anxious. We might be feeling fear. We might be feeling any of the things that you just listed there. What kinds of actions might you feel motivated to take, behaviors you might take when you're feeling fidgety or anxious or any of the things that you've shared? People willing to share in the chat, like what some of those urges or the behaviors might be? And if you don't want to share personal things, you can share about, kind of your imagining of what that might look like. Yeah, so picking skin, taking deep breaths, pacing, journaling. Yeah, a weighted blanket, right? Post on Twitter, mm, calling a friend, consuming content. Yeah, yeah. I just disappear, ghosts, aromatherapy, stretching. Yeah, watching videos on the issue I'm having. Yeah, sleeping, resting. Yeah. Holding a stuffed animal, trying to be present, finding the joys in life. Yeah. Tarot reading or praying, running away, run away. Yeah. So as I'm looking at those things, I'm seeing a lot of things that are, some of them are kind of leaning in, some of them are distracting, some of them are redirecting. I'm not trying to put words into your mouth about it, but like some of those behaviors are very different from each other. and what is useful one day might not be useful the next day. And those might be your go-to things. So it's like we all have things that we kind of lean into when we feel certain emotions. And sometimes there are things that are just like, oh my God, I feel different every time, and I'm just gonna try whatever I'm feeling right now and what I feel motivated to urge to act. So lots of ways that we can play out our emotions. And I'm seeing, some of you have mentioned things that are just like about staying in and pulling in and not acting in ways that might interact with another person. Other people are great to interact with as well, but lots of different ways to have things play out. Thank you for enjoying that or being part of that process of discovery. So again, just kind of a reminder of what that wheel is. I will send out the links in the resources so that folks can just take a look at it and find some other wheels if wheels are your thing, or have a conversation with other people about, hey, what do you think this emotion means, or what do you think the sensation feels like for you? Because sometimes it's kind of fun to hear what other people think and feel about their feelings and feelings. So I encourage you to have those conversations if you feel comfortable with that, or have those conversations with yourself. I wanted to let folks know about what's coming up the next 2 weeks. Um, I've labeled this loading up your environment. We're going to talk about literally loading up some things, kind of making some kits in week 2 and week 3. So it's kind of a little pun, but I wanted to let folks know about what's coming up next week is we're going to talk about slowing down and settling. So when our emotions are feeling big or high and we need to or want to slow down a little bit, chill out a little bit, find some calm. That's what we're going to be talking about next week. 2 weeks from then, the week after that, we're going to talk about ramping up or increasing emotions or getting things moving when sometimes things are feeling very sedentary or very stuck. So kind of 2 different ways that emotions might move, that we may want them to move. And we'll have some really good, fun, practical things that people can reflect on and to put into action if that feels so motivating to you. I know we're going to be a little bit early, and I know it's really late for some people, so we're gonna wrap up a little bit early, unless if there's space that people would like to engage with each other with. But let's do a kind of a checkout question about checking in with how do you feel. So think about how you're feeling right now. Again, if you don't want to share your own thing, it's going to be anonymous, but check in with yourself, and let's share one word about how you're feeling right now. Chat is fine. Oh my God, I didn't put a thing for the thing. It's going to have to be the chat because I didn't make a poll everywhere. Chat is good, please. Um, so I'm seeing a hopeful in the chat. Grateful. Introspective. Yeah. Gentle and curious. Yeah. Curious is one of my favorite words. Thank you for using curious. No words are better than others, but I love the word curious. Hungry. I'm hungry too. Yes. Challenged. Comforted. Thoughtful. Yeah. Yeah. Tired. Excellent words. Thank you for adding those words. Interested, I'm seeing come in. Yeah, lots of words. Thank you. Like I mentioned, we're going to send out some resources. So take a look in your inbox tomorrow. It should go out a day after the current time. So about tomorrow night, you should get an email that has some resource links. And I really hope that you all will join us next week and the week after. Um, I am happy to stay and hang out if folks would like to hang out. Otherwise, please have a really good rest of your night. And thank you for being here. And thank you to our interpreters for doing the smashingly good job that they always do. And for Caleb and Emil, thank you for being on the back end tonight. So thank you, everybody. I'm happy to answer the question. I'm trying to not call out people's names from the chat so that there's no identifying things. The question is, can people's bodies misinterpret different emotions? Of course they can. Yes, for sure. I wasn't being dismissive by, of course they can, but yes, most definitely. Um, Bodies are not always very accurate about how they interpret what's going on. So yeah, do you want to share an example of what you're thinking about? I would also be more than happy to have a combo afterwards tomorrow or whenever is good for you. So. See, I know the chat was going and so showing how everyone reacted differently to buzzing. Yeah, yeah. I think that I mean I think what we saw is that people's bodies might be in a certain way but have different emotions, or people might have emotions and have different bodily responses. So that for sure is really individual. And I think it's where it's a little bit dangerous when we rely on a chart to tell us what we're feeling or what our sensations mean. So yeah, most definitely. There's not a one-to-one correlation for every single person with here's a sensation and here's an emotion and here's that core emotion. So yeah, I mean, what your body is doing is exactly what it needs to do for what your emotions are. And sometimes it's just hard to name what those things are. It's a really good question. Thank you. Yeah.
Michael, can I add a piece to that?
Yeah, please.
This is Emil hopping in. Um, I think that's also a lot about like when we're, especially when we're kids, we're sometimes told that we're feeling emotions, and what we're told might not be right. So, if I'm told I'm supposed to be happy in a certain situation, but I'm actually really anxious in that situation, I might then start thinking the physical feelings of anxiety. Oh, well, that's supposed to be happiness. Everybody else is happy. So this must be what happy feels like. And so we kind of like it can learn to connect things that, that aren't actually connected, or like, you know, get really confused in how we interpret emotions. And so, and for people who are brought up, not express their feelings, recognizing the body feeling and the emotion, and then connecting the two can be really, really challenging, and take a lot of time to like unpack stuff we were told that was wrong and figure out what's really going on.
That is super. Thank you for adding that. That's fantastic. Yeah, cool. We're going to wrap up. Thank you for being here. The rest of you who are still here, I hope to see everybody next week. Thank you.